Hello and welcome to today's Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader and I'll be your host today as we talk about modernizing strategies for managing tech debt in the data center. And with me, we have three experts. We'll start off with Juan Orlandini, who's CTO in North America and a distinguished technologist with us here at Insight. We've also got Kent Christensen, Practice Director of Cloud and Data Center, and Steve Curran, who's a Regional Engineering Director in Management Ops. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Jason and Kent, Steve. It's always great to see you guys.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
So this is a follow-up kind of conversation. We talked about tech debt as we have talked about it a lot, but we thought we'd hone in specifically on data center tech debt and kind of strategies. And I think that's a pretty hot topic these days. One, I've seen you comment on a couple of different media related to this topic. So what are we generally talking about? And I'll let Kent, who's probably neutral in this whole thing, answer this question. What do we think we're talking about when we talk about tech debt in the data center?
I don't know what neutral means. We all have an opinion.
Well, then we need to go even further back.
I agree. I think a lot of times when we see as an infrastructure, data center, cloud, et cetera, a lot of people are trying to deal with tech debt, whether it's an application or a lot of times their infrastructure, right? Hey, I've got some aged infrastructure. It's blocking me from getting things to what I wanted to do organizationally, et cetera. But more and more what's coming up is I've got these platforms. It could be my virtualization platform. It could have been I got into cloud and I need to make adjustments, et cetera. And that goes way beyond just buying new stuff that meets my needs moving forward. It goes into, as Juan's pointed out, now I've got operational issues. I got used to operating this way, and it's beyond tech, and it's into operational debt.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit more prescriptive as to what Kent said, all right? Because he's right, but it's kind of fuzzy in the way he described it.
It's pretty neutral.
Yeah, very neutral. And you told him to do that, so he did exactly what you asked him to do. All right. So let's call it out. All right. There's a lot of things that are happening around the VMware ecosystem. Should I stay? Should I go on that side of the house? There's also been for a while now this modernization to containerized platforms, right? And there's also been a conversation about moving to cloud or from cloud back to data center. And what does that mean to you operationally, fiscally, all these other things? All of those are making it a very complicated situation right now for our clients. The Broadcom acquisition of VMware has thrown lots of curveballs at us, and they're still changing. And things are being announced as late as last week as to how things are available on that side. We hear from customers that have migrated to the cloud that are saying, "Oh my gosh, I lifted and shifted, and now it's costing me X more. I want to come back." And then there's customers that are like, "Hey, I need the flexibility of the cloud. I don't want to have this legacy crufted stuff that's sitting in the data center. I'm in the business of making burgers or hot dogs or cars or whatever it is that they make. I'm just going to move it all to the cloud." Those are all huge technical debt conversations, and they are underpinned, as Kent said, because you do have some operational stuff that you have to do. You just can't pick technology and just go. You got to operate it. And if there's inertia behind that operations, you got to figure that out too. And so that's the challenge that we're helping our clients through right now, is how to rationalize that complexity that's happening.
Okay, well, we only have 30 minutes, so we're gonna have to whittle that down. Like you said, we can talk hours about this. And I think, Steve, this one's for you because I think we need to figure it out. So a little while ago, what I would hear all these executives say is, I want to get out of the data center business, right? And I think that implied more the physical aspects of the data center and some of the things related to that, which may or may not still be true. But I think there's this, talking to executives, what do they get from this? Is just getting rid of tech debt the cool thing to do because it's a cool saying? Or I think what do they get from doing this whole thing?
Well, I think that's probably, I'm going to reverse it a little bit on you, is, what do they get is they need help to figure out what they are going to get. And that's why they come to us. I mean, ultimately, sure. And they go to their own teams to say, hey, we need to, figure this out. So who is going to help us? And that's where Insight comes in and says, hey, we can help educate you to understand, well, what are we going to do with our data center? Is that data center the physical location that's in the building that they're located with? Is it a co-location that they're in? Are they thinking the cloud? Because to me, and what I hear in the field a lot from our clients and from architects is, the data centers, which is, I think, a term that Juan actually coined a while ago, it's more of centers of data than an actual data center, right? And with, the whole virtualization discussion, well, you can virtualize your environments in all these different centers of data, from whether it's in a cloud or whether it's on-prem in your colo or actually in the building, that you actually go into every day in an office. So it's a complex situation to answer. How do I get out of my data center? And virtualization ultimately gives you that flexibility on where you want to move and everything else. And clients come to someone else like an Insight to figure out, I need help educate me, help me guide me that path, be my partner to ultimately take me there.
So I'm going to take what Steve said, and I'm going to touch on something that's really important, because we're still being a little fuzzy, and I think people are asking for something a little bit more concrete. All right, and I don't want to make it a 45-day conversation, because we could easily make it a 45-day conversation. So I'm just going to say it. All right. The Broadcom acquisition has really highlighted, all right, that if you put all your eggs into one basket, you are going to, at some point, have to make some decisions to potentially exit that. All right. I'm not saying to exit Broadcom VMware, because for many customers, that's actually the wrong thing to do. All right. But for many customers, this is now becoming an and statement. I have Broadcom and something else. And there's lots of entrants into that space now that's at one point were in the periphery, but are now becoming more centered. And there's things like OpenShift and Nutanix, and believe it or not, I'm hearing more about OpenStack now. We thought that was long and gone. It's actually turning out to have actually matured quite a bit while we weren't looking, and now it might actually be a real player again. All right. And so what is it that we really are talking about? It's really a self-evaluation. Is where are these platforms, whether they're from Broadcom or the cloud or in the edge, that's a whole separate thing, continuing to bring you value that outstrip the amount of investment that you have to make with your people. That's really the difference in technical debt, right? The more you have to invest with your people, the more technical debt you have. It's the way I think about it, right? So where you can lean in on a platform choice that eliminates some of that lift from your people, then you're actually eliminating a lot of the technical debt, because then your technical people can focus on other things. So that's the way to really think about this. And whether it's a Broadcom to something else or something else to Broadcom, doesn't matter. It's the same thing, right? And that's the way we should really think about it. We gotta get confused because of all these choices and stuff. And it's easy, but it's hard at the same time.
And I'll double down on that comment on the hard one, because so many businesses have those applications over in the corner that they haven't touched, right? And they're running on legacy software and they can't be upgraded. And, the one person that managed them is gone or whatever else. So now they're at a point of like, okay, do I change my, you want to talk about that? That's locking you down in what you can do, in the sense of being able to take that application and maybe modernize it. And you want to talk about a lockdown debt, it ends up being, an anchor to a little bit. So,
well, we run into that all the time, by the way. And Steve, you and I have done this a number of times with our clients. In case the audience doesn't know, we actually help a number of clients do migrations from data center to cloud, cloud to cloud, cloud to data center, and any combination of those. But to do those migrations, one of the things that we always talk about is you have to plan, and then execute. And to help us plan, we actually wrote a tool called SnapStart that really helps us understand where these workloads are residing and the dependencies of those workloads. And what's amazing is every time we run that SnapStart tool, we discover that there's this thing that's been sitting in the corner closet or under a desk or in the tucked away in the virtual server of some sort that nobody knows anything about it, but it's afraid to touch it, right? And it might even be critical to how your entire business runs, and you're just afraid to touch it. So you have to go find these things. And so that's a long-winded way of saying you have to analyze what's going on before you can actually start doing any of these changes, because it might be that you have to discover that there's this little thing that's sitting way over here that without it, you're out of business. Well, let's go find that little thing, and then let's figure out with a rational plan how to modernize that thing, and then work your way through the system and get to a healthier state.
I think I just got back from a West Coast client, and a lot of these touch base. One, I want to get out of my data center. That was the physical building, right?
Oh, yeah.
So then, Steve, mentioned, well, virtualization gave you flexibility, but only really gave you flexibility within a data center. When people say, I'm going to take my, let's say, VMware and move it to the cloud, VMware was not part of the cloud. It's a foreign entity that you have to pay to run that, as well as your application, et cetera. So containers and things like that give you more agility, et cetera. And then I think, this client was going through all of these, right? How do I move my physical plant? Where do I want it to be? I want it to be near where I need resources, either users or other applications. Maybe I want cloud apps, et cetera. But as Steve pointed out, that what am I going to do with AI? I don't want to get backed into another corner. And it really is, where's your data? And that's going to help you figure out a lot about, how do I update my platforms and where things go based on where my data is, because I'm going to need to use that.
And I think that's where I was kind of driving with the what do we get kind of thing, because I think, again, fixing tech debt for the sake of fixing tech debt, nobody's super excited about. But I think dealing with the tech debt to allow us to get the capabilities that we need or maximize the use of the current skill sets that we have, that's the driver. So that's what's going to get the business level folks engaged. And then, I do think, and we still have been a little neutral on the whole VMware thing, because I think that there's if we stay, we can do some good stuff with VMware, but it's going to cost more money, and we need to ingest the rest of this platform that now we're paying for that we should. And it could be very robust for the organization if they were able to double down on it that way. Or there could be we got to move out. And I think a lot of people think that that's just writing a check, and it's way more than that to deal with. But then there's the whole, is VMware, I mean, besides that, there's other aspects of cloud or whatever that might be the reason that we've got to make the changes to get into whatever it is that's got the business folks excited. Sorry, was that too broad of a statement? I wanted to be.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, and the premise of this conversation, by the way, is what are the common pitfalls that we're seeing when doing these things, right? And I'll tell you, time and time again, whether it's through Kent, who I don't know why, but in this filter, he looks like Max Headroom because he keeps on coming in and out of focus. Through the comment that he made with that client or whatever it is, or when we go and talk to smaller or larger customers, they seem almost an analysis paralysis mode, because there's so much potential complexity in modernizing your stuff, and you're doing it with essentially zero budget for modernizing, because you have to use your budget to keep the lights on or to innovate or whatever it is, right?
That's what makes it a hard decision. It stretches across so many parts of the business. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so the question is really, how do I get out of this deadlock? What is it that I can do, right? And it's, it's going to sound trivial. It's going to sound almost dismissive to what I'm going to say. But how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And this is it's the exact same thing here. You got to go find the thing that's going to be the tastiest bite of the elephant, that's going to give you the first entry into it, right? And return some value to you. So maybe you got to modernize how your networking happens. Maybe you got to modernize some of the automation tooling that you have. Maybe you got to modernize some of the training that your people have so they can think in these newer technologies. Because if your people can't operate them, again, you're not going to do it. You're just not going to do it, right? So one of those things has to be found and discovered. And for every organization, it's going to be slightly different. We'll find that maximum return, minimum amount of investment. And then that should free up more and more. And over time, as long as you do this on a continual basis and you create a backlog of these modernization things and measure them against return, you should be able to come back to a strategy that works for you.
In the field, as a lot of the architects that work with me, you hear the modernized term when you talk to our clients, and all they're seeing is dollar signs, right? Oh, how much is it going to cost me to modernize this? If I modernize that, is there an ROI? And I think you're seeing even in today's world more now that, everyone loves to throw out the the term FinOps, right? Well, how am I going to get an ROI from modernizing this, and what is the biggest bang for the buck, and taking the right bite one, to use your analogy, out of that elephant. If I take the wrong bite, oh, it's going to cost me this, or I'm not going to get that. But I got to take that right bite, and which is the right one, which is where we get into then, hey, let us help you figure that out. Let us run SnapStart. Let us figure out and analyze the situation before you go starting and potentially taking that wrong bite that then ultimately creates more tech debt for you, right? I mean, really looking at it from not just a technology perspective, but a financial perspective, right? How are we going to do this? Is it OpEx, CapEx? What works well for each client and how their financial models work in their business that both modernizes it in a cost-effective manner that gives me that right bite of that elephant.
I thought you were going to go down. That's exactly right. But I thought you were headed down a different path, which is also important to call out. Is that a lot of times people are thinking that what we're suggesting is that they need to buy new gear or a new kit of some sort, all right? And that's sometimes that's true for fact. I mean, if you have old 10-year-old servers, you might be better off buying new ones that are denser, faster, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with storage and networks and all that other stuff. But you probably have a whole bunch of stuff that is extremely serviceable that just needs to be managed in a different way, or operated in a different way, or repurposed in a different way. And if you can do that while doing these other things, at least one portion of the cost burden gets deferred until later, because at some point you're going to have to deal with them, right? But you can defer that expense, and maybe it is more of a, hey, let's do something through a CapEx, instead of CapEx, do an OpEx kind of augmentation of what we have, or retraining my people, or whatever it is that you need to do, right?
Or to tee up Mr. Ken Christensen, as a service, because as a service is another model of, okay, does that provide you flexibility in your decision-making process and everything else? And I know that warms Ken's heart whenever I bring up as a service in evaluating different situations.
I think it's an example. Technical debt is a negative term, but everybody who got into technical debt did it for the right reason at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I have a valid reason for having this application, having this platform, using this virtualization, gig in the cloud, etc. And these were the things I had. As we move forward, we've talked about a dozen different things. Which ones are important to you? There probably are two variables. One is cost. I'm not going to pay infinite just to get out of technical debt. And two is opportunity. What is this going to help me achieve to the organization if I get rid of something that, quite frankly, was probably running the company at the time? And as Steve points out, sometimes people went to public cloud to get out of the data center and or to not own and operate infrastructure, and consumption models have come along in the last few years that says you can have the cloud brought to you. And so there's so many different options that you have today that you didn't have then that got you into this situation.
So Ken, I love that. It's exactly right. So the consumption model of the cloud is part of what's being addressed by these by our OEMs, and sometimes in conjunction with the OEMs. And what I mean by that is, if you wanted to create a AI cloud, you cannot get that from just directly from one of the OEMs, because you're going to need stuff from maybe NVIDIA, you're going to need storage from one vendor, compute from a different vendor, blah, blah, blah. And doing that all as a single consumption model is actually almost not practical unless you run it through somebody like us that becomes an as a service aggregator for you, right? The other thing about it, though, is that when you deploy a different fiscal model for acquiring the technology, that doesn't mean that you have a private cloud. You have a different fiscal model for acquiring technology, all right? That's all you've done. You have to have a different operating model in order for you to actually be able to run it as a private cloud. And that's actually one of the big considerations, that if you're going to be rebuilding your infrastructure or rebuilding your data centers, or truly building a private cloud, you better build it to operate like a private cloud, the public clouds do, which is highly automated, developer-centric, all those things that go into that, the CNCF definition of a private cloud.
Yeah. And I think, so trying to give some nuggets to folks out there that are listening going, man, they've talked about everything from FinOps to physical hardware in this conversation. But I do think that we typically don't try to to sell, well, come see us if you need some help with this kind of thing. But man, are you really up against having to ingest a gigantic amount of things across an entire ecosystem? A partner like Insight is where you get that expertise kind of pulled in together. And again, we sell VMware, but we sell the replacement technologies and services from a VMware perspective as well. And that's not me being one way or the other, but I'm just saying somebody like Insight that's got that full gambit approach from the application development all the way to the infrastructure part, I think that's key. So if you don't get help here, get help somewhere is probably the important aspect of this, because it's really difficult to kind of articulate all this stuff within an organization that's struggling with tech debt.
Well, and it's also, remember that you have lots of different personas, right, Jason? So you have your developer personas that are going to be looking at technical debt completely differently than what we've been talking about here, because they're going to be looking at it from the frameworks, programming languages, development methodologies, all those different things that are technical debt in and of their own. That's one persona. Then you have your finance people, to Steve's point. From a FinOps perspective, a lot of people think FinOps only applies to the cloud. That's not true at all. In fact, it should apply to your in a private data center too, right? And that's technical debt in and of its own by its. And then there's all the other things that we talked about. So do find somebody that at least understands how to talk to all of those different personas and aspects of technical debt, because it is complicated, Hydra-like beast with multiple ugly heads trying to snap your neck off, right? And if it's not us, at least find somebody that can at least be conversant across all these different technologies and aspects.
I think, Jason, you hit it, and you touched on it. So every time we're in talking to somebody about some level of technical debt, let's just say it's AI, it could be virtualization. So you could just put up a list of OEM logos, whether it's Broadcom, VMware, AWS, Azure, Google, just go down the list, server guys, network guys, etc. If you go individually to one of them, of course they do cloud, of course they do AI. They don't need anybody else's help. But at the end of the day, the solution always puts multiple of them together. How do I get my NVIDIA chip into my compute, connected to my storage, networks to the cloud, et cetera, into a data center? And that's usually where these discussions go.
To deliver the business outcome that the business folks want, right?
Cost effective, yes.
Yeah, well, two things. Either make me money or save me money, right? That's the two things the business people want. That's it.
Well, that's why I like, I mean, well, that's simplified, but one, I still go back to your analogy, which I think is the perfect one, is the elephant. I mean, it's a massive elephant. How do you take out the right bite and get it smaller so you can focus on what you're trying to get to when you have that whole elephant that you still need to manage, control, and everything else? And we haven't even talked about securing it and all these data and everything else around that. Yeah, I know Jason got excited when I brought up security. But I mean, that elephant is really true. You can't put an elephant in a cage when it comes to your whole environment, when you're looking at FinOps and data centers and virtualization and security that wraps all around it. I mean, you gotta help. You need help, and you get focused to get the ultimate end goal of what you're trying to accomplish.
To try to make this less overwhelming, there usually is a pretty clear way to figure out which bite of the elephant to take, and we call it the compelling event. Either I have a contract up, I have, whether it's my data center contract, my VMware contract, I just got a notice that my servers aren't going to be supported anymore. That compelling event is the one to focus on first, and then just ask questions. How will this fit into the big picture moving forward? But usually the compelling events will tell you what's important first.
And I think the motion, I would say, moving forward is the easiest way to, or it's easier to eat an elephant if you have a team to eat the elephant, right?
So Jason, I think we've beaten this one to death a little bit, at least as far as this level of conversation,
It's true. I mean, without going to a whiteboard and taking teams into breakout rooms, I think we have hit the kind of the limit of this conversation. But what I want folks out there to know, and we appreciate your comments and all of the things that you would do to suggest further topics or further deep dives into these, is that this is a lot of stuff. And, we're experts in our fields, and we have tons of tech folks behind us and consultants to back us up, but it's hard for us. I mean, there's a learning curve regardless. When new tech, when you throw in the licensing aspects and the financial aspects of it, and the new tech that we're trying to go to market with our customers and those kinds of things, it's a lot of stuff. And I think that, you know, this exemplifies when you've got 4 really smart guys on their expertise coming together, there's still a lot of stuff to cover, more than we can cover in 30 minutes. But I super appreciate the conversation, guys. I'd love to throw gold nuggets out at the end, or some words of encouragement. We'll go around the room. Kent, why don't you go? Then we'll go Steve, then Juan.
No, I think every client is going through this complicated thing. Like I say, it was always a good idea at the time. There's usually some driving business objective or compelling event that drives this to the top of the things to worry about. That's the number one thing we start with. And then other things may come up, you know, and we kind of work through a broader solution that says, okay, let's do this moving forward so that we don't get back into a corner again later.
So I'll take a little more of an end in mind perspective and saying, what is your end in mind? Where are you trying to go? Set up your strategies so that we can then work towards those, and then lay out a strategy of how to handle whatever technical debt and whatever the components related to that is. What is your end in mind? What is your goal? And then how do the various strategies and workflows get you to that end?
Well, I think they said it perfectly well. So I'm just going to say one thing that I've been saying for decades at this point. All right. I learned this very early on in my career, is that no matter what technology choice you make, and Kent talked about this, today, at some point in the future, it'll be old and needs to be retired. I don't care if it's the compute platform, your network, your development platform, your whatever, it doesn't matter. And what you should have, if you don't have it today, you should create it moving forward so that you can avoid this in the future as you fix these things, is an exit strategy. An exit strategy for every technology that you buy in. And that could be your laptops. I mean, it could literally be any component. You should have a plan for an exit strategy for those. And if you do, then when that time happens, which could be 5 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, you're ready for it. And that's, I think, part of the reason we have technical debt, is that we don't plan for that exit strategy.
Thanks, guys. I mean, and just to sum it all up, I don't think there's no easy button for any of this. And even in the same vertical with the same tech stack, it's still based on how the business operates and the people that are there. It's different. And one of the benefits that we've got is we've seen a lot of things. And if it's ever been done before, we've probably know about it. If it's never been done before, we can probably help you do that too. But what they've got to show up with is, what do they want to do? And then we'll start from where they are and help them get to where they want to be. You guys rock. Thanks so much. I am sure we're going to be back to talk more about this topic.
Sure.
Thanks everybody out there for watching. Thanks for your comments, and we appreciate you. If you want to know more about what we do, please visit us at insight.com. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.